He didn't divorce me in an office. He didn't even wait for me to heal. He looked at me, holding our newborn child in my arms, and said one sentence that destroyed my entire life. You are not the kind of woman a successful man stays with. That was the moment I learned something dangerous. When a man thinks you're weak, he becomes cruel. But what he didn't know was this. That same moment was the beginning of his end. I was a housewife, not lazy, not ignorant, just invisible. For years, my world was small but honest. School lunches, clean clothes, quiet prayers at night. I trusted my husband completely because he was rich, respected, and confident. Everyone said I was lucky. But luck does not require you to stay silent. Luck does not replace love with arrogance. The day I came home from the hospital, my body weak and my heart full, I noticed something strange. He wasn't looking at our child, he was looking at his phone, smiling. Later that night, while the city slept and my baby cried softly, he finally said it. He told me there was someone else, younger, ambitious, more compatible with his future. Then he added the line that still echoes in my head. You wouldn't survive without me, anyway. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He spoke calmly, like a man explaining a business decision. Divorce papers were already prepared. He said he would handle everything. Small monthly support, no involvement in his world anymore. And then he said the sentence meant to finish me. You don't have any real skills. At that moment, I realized something painful. He had never seen me as a partner, only as a background character in his success story. That night, my baby slept on my chest. I stared at the ceiling, asking myself one terrifying question. How do I raise a child when I have nothing? No savings, no job history, no confidence left. The next morning, my son looked at me and smiled. And for the first time since the divorce, I didn't cry. Because when you become a mother, fear turns into fuel. People talk. Some felt sorry for me. Most blamed me. She should have tried harder. He was too successful for her. She'll go back. She has no choice. Even I almost believed them. Almost. But every time I held my son, I remembered his father's words. You wouldn't survive without me. And something inside me refused to die. One night, scrolling endlessly to distract my pain, I watched a short video about money. Not motivation, not luxury, just simple words. Money is a skill, and skills can be learned. That sentence stayed with me. What if he was wrong? What if being a housewife didn't mean being helpless? What if this wasn't the end? That night, while my baby slept beside me, I opened my laptop. Not to cry, not to beg, but to learn. I didn't know anything about finance. I didn't know anyone powerful. But I made one promise to myself. No matter how long it takes, one day he will regret underestimating me. And that was the night everything quietly changed. People think success starts with confidence. It doesn't. It starts with making mistakes so painful that quitting feels easier than continuing. And I made one mistake that almost left my son and me with nothing. Learning sounded beautiful in part 1. Reality was brutal. I didn't wake up confident. I woke up scared. Every morning, I looked at my son and wondered if I was being selfish. Should I just beg my ex-husband for help? Should I accept that this life was too big for me? But then I remembered his words. You don't have any real skills. And I kept going. I learned at night. While my son slept beside me, I watched videos with low volume. Finance basics, budgeting, investing, business terms I couldn't even pronounce. Some nights, I understood nothing. Other nights, I felt smart for the first time in my life. I didn't tell anyone, because when people see you struggling, they laugh. When they see you dreaming, they judge. So I stayed quiet. After months of learning, I thought I was ready. I invested my small savings into an online opportunity. It promised fast growth, smart returns, easy success. I believed it. 2 weeks later, the platform disappeared. Just like that. My money was gone. I stared at the screen for hours, unable to breathe. That money wasn't extra. It was rent. It was food. It was safety. That night I cried silently so my son wouldn't hear me. The next day I counted coins to buy groceries. At the store, my card was declined. People behind me waited. The cashier looked away. In that moment, I didn't feel ambitious. I felt stupid. Maybe my ex-husband was right. Maybe I had crossed a line I wasn't meant to cross. That night, I opened my laptop to quit. Instead of quitting, I replayed one video I had watched earlier. The woman in the video said, "If you lose money, you paid for education. If you quit, you wasted it." I closed my eyes. I realized something important. I didn't fail because I was weak. I failed because I rushed. So I made a new rule. No shortcuts, no promises, no quick wins. Only real skills. I started again. This time, I studied balance sheets. I learned why businesses fail. I understood risk. Slow progress, tiny steps. No excitement, no dopamine, just discipline. Months passed. No one noticed, but inside, something was changing. One day, I ran into my ex-husband. He looked confident, successful, untouched. He asked politely, "How are you managing?" Before I could answer, he smiled and said, "If you ever need help, you know where to find me." Not kindness, control. I smiled back and said nothing, because some answers take time. A few weeks later, I made my first clean profit. It wasn't big, but it was real. I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell anyone. I just looked at my son and whispered, "We're going to be okay." I thought the worst was over. I was wrong, because the next opportunity I touched was connected to the same world my ex-husband ruled, and one wrong move there could expose everything. Every successful story has one moment where everything can collapse. For me, that moment came when someone said just one sentence. "If this fails, you will lose everything." I still said yes. My first profit gave me confidence, not excitement. Confidence. I finally believed that learning could change my life. That's when an opportunity appeared. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't fast. It was dangerous. A small but growing company needed silent investors, not public, not popular. High risk, high pressure. They didn't care about motivation. They cared about numbers. I studied their financials for weeks. Every line, every debt, every possibility. On paper, it looked broken. But broken things can be fixed if you understand them. I showed the opportunity to the only person who knew what I was doing. She looked at the numbers and said, "This is the same industry your ex-husband works in." My heart stopped. She continued, "If you fail here, you won't just lose money, you will lose credibility. And credibility, once lost, never comes back." That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about my son. I thought about my ex-husband's words. I thought about how close I was to becoming invisible again. I had two choices: play safe and stay small, or risk everything and grow. Fear told me to stop. Pride told me to prove something, but something else spoke louder. Logic. I didn't invest blindly. I negotiated. Smaller entry, stricter control, clear exit plan. No emotions, just strategy. The day I signed the papers, my hands shook. Not because I was weak, because I understood the weight of my decision. Weeks passed. No news, no profits, no reassurance. Every notification made my heart race. At night, I imagined worst-case scenarios. What if I failed again? What if I had misread the numbers? I didn't tell my son. Some fears are too heavy for children. One evening, an email arrived. Subject line, quarterly update. My hands trembled as I opened it. The numbers were improving, not exploding, improving. Slow growth, stable recovery. It wasn't victory, but it wasn't death either. 2 days later, something strange happened. My ex-husband called. Not about our son, not about money. He asked casually, "Are you involved in any investments these days?" I paused. How did he know? He laughed and said, "It's a small industry. News travels fast." I said nothing, but for the first time, he sounded uncertain. That night, I realized something terrifying. If this investment succeeded, I would enter his world. If it failed, he would watch me fall. There would be no middle ground. I thought I was ready for pressure. I wasn't. Because the next message I received was from someone inside his company, and it changed everything. Part 4. The information I was never supposed to see. The message came late at night. No greeting, no name. Just one line. You need to know what your ex-husband is hiding. At first I thought it was a joke or a scam. I ignored it. But then another message came. This time there was a file attached. I didn't open it immediately. Something about it felt heavy, like opening it would change the direction of my life. My son was asleep beside me. I looked at his face, peaceful and unaware, and reminded myself why I had started all of this. Then I opened the file. It was financial data, internal reports, numbers that didn't match what the public knew. I wasn't an expert yet, but I knew enough to feel my stomach tighten. These weren't small mistakes. They were decisions made to hide losses. Suddenly, everything made sense. The nervous tone in my ex-husband's voice, the sudden interest in my investments. Someone inside his company was scared. The anonymous messenger messaged again. He thinks you don't understand this world. That's his biggest mistake. I closed my laptop and sat in silence. For years, I had been invisible in that man's life. Now I was seeing the cracks in the empire he was so proud of. But knowing something and using it are two very different things. If I spoke, I could destroy him. If I stayed silent, I could protect myself. I chose a third option. I watched. For weeks, I said nothing. I studied patterns. I followed money trails the way I once followed recipes. Slowly, a picture formed. His company wasn't failing yet, but it was bleeding. And bleeding companies make desperate decisions. One afternoon, he called again. This time, there was no confidence in his voice. He asked me what I thought about the market, about risk, about timing. I answered carefully, not like a wife, not like an enemy, like an investor. When the call ended, my hands were shaking because I realized something dangerous. He didn't see me as a threat. He saw me as harmless. That illusion was my power. Days later, the anonymous messenger sent one last message. A major move is coming. If you act too early, you lose. If you act too late, you lose everything. I'd understood. This wasn't about revenge. It was about positioning. I had to be patient, smarter than emotion, colder than fear. That night, I didn't sleep because I knew the next step would decide whether I stayed a survivor or became something else entirely. And once I moved forward, there would be no turning back. I stopped reacting. That was the first change people noticed. Before, every message, every number, every risk made my heart race. Now, I waited. I learned something important during those weeks. Power doesn't rush. While everyone else chased fast wins, I became invisible again, but this time by choice. I moved my money quietly, small amounts, different entries, nothing loud. On the surface, my life looked the same. Same apartment, same routine, same silence. But underneath, everything was shifting. One evening, I received an invite to a small private meeting. Not public, not advertised, just a few investors. I almost didn't go. Rooms like that are dangerous. People smile while measuring your worth. But I went anyway. I listened more than I spoke, watched who interrupted, noticed who avoided eye contact when numbers were mentioned. That's when I realized something most people miss. The loudest person in the room was the weakest. I asked one question, just one, and the room went quiet. After that night, doors opened. Not because I was aggressive, but because I was precise. Days later, my ex-husband called again. This time, there was respect in his voice. He asked what I thought about a merger his company was considering. I answered honestly, but not completely, because timing matters more than truth. When the call ended, I stared at my reflection. For the first time, I didn't see a woman trying to prove herself. I saw someone who understood the game. Then, something unexpected happened. The company I had invested in released a quiet update. No press, no celebration. But the numbers were clean. Too clean. I realized they were preparing for something bigger. That's when I understood the real danger. If a larger company stepped in now, control would shift overnight. And I knew exactly which company was watching. His. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid, because I was calculating. If I moved too soon, I'd expose myself. If I waited too long, I'd lose the position I had worked so hard to build. Meanwhile, my son asked me a simple question. "Mom, are we safe now?" I hugged him and said yes. But inside, I knew safety was temporary. Only control lasts. The next morning, I received another message. Not anonymous this time, just a name, a senior executive. The message was short. "We need to talk, privately." I stared at the screen for a long time, because once powerful people start calling you directly, there's no going back to being invisible. And I knew this conversation would decide whether I stayed on the edge or stepped fully into the world that once rejected me. The meeting didn't happen in an office. It happened over coffee. No assistants, no lawyers, just two people who understood that silence can be more powerful than words. The executive didn't waste time. He told me the truth my ex-husband didn't know yet. His company was running out of options. Bad decisions had stacked up, and now larger players were circling. They needed capital, quiet capital, someone who wouldn't panic. I didn't answer immediately. I asked one question instead. What happens to management after this? The executive smiled. That smile told me everything. I left without promising anything. On the way home, I felt something unfamiliar. Calm. For years, I had lived reacting to life. Now, life was waiting for my response. That night, I reviewed every document again. Not emotionally, strategically. This wasn't about revenge. It was about leverage. I agreed, but on my terms. Minority stake at first, board access, full transparency. They accepted faster than I expected. That's when I knew how desperate the situation really was. Weeks passed. The market didn't notice. Media stayed silent. But inside the company, things changed. Meetings became tense, voices lower, decisions slower. My ex-husband started calling more often, not to offer help, to ask questions. He wanted reassurance. I gave him data, not comfort. One evening, he said something that made me pause. "I don't recognize this version of you." I almost laughed, but I didn't, because he still thought this was about me. It wasn't. It was about numbers. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A sudden audit. Unplanned, unavoidable. The same reports I had seen months ago were now under review. Phones rang late at night, meetings stretched for hours. And then, silence. His calls stopped. A week later, I received an official email. The board was restructuring. Senior positions were being reconsidered. I read the list slowly. His name was there, but not where it used to be. I closed my laptop and sat back. No joy, no celebration, just understanding. Power doesn't announce itself. It simply rearranges the room. My son ran in and hugged me. "Mom, you look happy." I smiled, not because I had won, but because I knew the hardest part was almost over. And when he finally realized what was happening, it would already be too late. He didn't lose everything in one day. It happened slowly, quietly, the way real consequences arrive. At first, it was small things. Meetings he was no longer invited to. Emails that stopped coming to him directly. He told people he was stepping back by choice. But I knew the truth. The board didn't trust him anymore. One evening, he finally called. Not confident, not arrogant. Tired. He asked if we could meet. For the first time in years, his voice sounded unsure. We met in a place he used to choose when he felt powerful. This time he arrived early. He talked about pressure, about responsibility, about how unfair the market had become. I listened. I didn't interrupt. Because when people talk while falling, they reveal more than they intend to. Then he said it. "I think I made a mistake." Not about me. About his decisions. That told me everything. A few days later, the news broke quietly. The company had been acquired. No headlines about him, no praise, just a short announcement. Leadership restructuring, operational realignment. I read it once, then closed the screen. That night, my phone rang again. This time, he didn't ask questions. He asked for help. Not as a husband, not as a leader, as someone who had run out of options. He said he needed a job, something stable, something temporary. I didn't answer immediately. I looked at my son, sitting on the floor doing his homework. Years ago, this man had looked at that same child and walked away. I finally spoke. I told him to send his resume. There was silence on the other end of the line. Long silence. He didn't argue. He didn't laugh. He understood. The next day, his resume arrived in my inbox. I didn't open it right away, not out of anger, out of clarity. I forwarded it to HR with one sentence: "Please review." Nothing else. No explanation, no emotion. That afternoon, HR confirmed they would interview him. I sat quietly at my desk. No victory music, no revenge speech. Just peace. Because karma doesn't need an audience. It just needs time. And I knew the final moment was still coming. The air was tense as she walked into the grand office. Every step echoed her journey. Every betrayal, every sleepless night, every risk she had taken. Her heart raced, but not with fear. This was the moment she had been preparing for years. Her ex-husband was there, sitting across from her, looking like a man who had lost everything he once took for granted. Pride, arrogance, and control, gone. He couldn't hide the shock in his eyes when he saw her. The woman he left for someone younger was now the owner of the empire he had dreamed of controlling. She smiled, but it wasn't a cruel smile. It was a smile of power, confidence, and self-made triumph. She said calmly, "You underestimated me. While you wasted your life chasing distractions, I built something real." He tried to speak, to explain, to argue, but she didn't need to hear it. Her revenge wasn't about words. It was about living proof that she had become unstoppable. He realized too late that karma had no mercy. She had mastered finance, investments, and leadership while being a single mother. Every deal she had made, every decision she had taken, had led her to this exact moment. Her ex-husband's eyes filled with regret, but she didn't gloat, didn't shout, didn't humiliate him. That was the difference between someone broken by life and someone empowered by it. She turned, walking away, leaving him with his own failure and the bitter taste of what could have been. Outside, the sunlight hit her face. She felt free, strong, invincible. She had not just survived betrayal, she had thrived, conquered, and rewritten her destiny. The past was gone. The pain was transformed into power, and the future was hers to create. She whispered to herself, almost like a mantra, "I lost nothing that mattered. I gained everything I deserved." And with that, the final chapter closed, leaving behind a story of resilience, triumph, and ultimate justice.